My name is Carlos, and I never believed in ghosts. At least not until I started working as a night guard at the old Hospicio de Pedro II. The huge, decaying building was in the city center, a dark relic of the past that most people preferred to ignore. But I needed the money, and the night shift paid well. On my first night, I arrived early to get to know the place. The sun was setting, casting long shadows down the empty corridors. The smell of mold and decay filled the air, making my stomach turn. As I walked through the dark hallways, I felt as if invisible eyes were watching me. At first, everything seemed normal, well, as normal as an abandoned asylum could be. I did my rounds, checked the doors, and tried to ignore the strange noises that echoed through the walls. Creaking wood, wind whistling through broken windows, nothing I couldn't explain. But on the third night, things started to change. I was doing my usual rounds when I heard something different, a low, rhythmic whisper, as if someone was murmuring to themselves. I followed the sound to an old treatment room. The door was ajar, creaking softly. I swallowed hard and entered. The room was empty, of course, but the whisper continued, now seeming to come from the very walls. I approached, pressing my ear against the peeling wallpaper. The words were indistinguishable, but the tone was pure despair. Suddenly, I felt something cold touch the back of my neck. I turned quickly, my heart racing, but there was nothing there, just the emptiness of the room and that incessant whisper. I ran out, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. In the following days, I tried to focus on my work and ignore the growing feeling that something was wrong. But the strange events kept piling up. Objects moved when my back was turned. Doors I was sure I had locked appeared open. And that whisper, it seemed to follow me everywhere in the building now. One night, I found an old diary hidden behind a cabinet. The yellowed pages were filled with a patient's frantic scribbles. Most were illegible, but one phrase repeated, "The walls are hungry." A chill ran down my spine. I started having terrible nightmares. I dreamed of endless corridors, muffled screams, and pale hands reaching out from the walls to grab me. I woke up in a cold sweat, uncertain if I was really awake or still trapped in the nightmare. Things got worse when I met Maria, the cleaner who came twice a week. She was the only other person I saw regularly in the asylum. First, we would chat a bit before she left. But as the weeks passed, I noticed changes in her behavior. Maria grew paler and more distracted. Her once bright and cheerful eyes now seemed dull and distant. One night, I found her standing in the middle of a corridor, staring fixedly at the wall. When I touched her shoulder, she turned slowly. Her face was contorted in an expression of pure terror. "They are in the walls," she whispered. "They want to come out." Before I could respond, Maria ran off. I never saw her again after that night. When I asked the cleaning company, they said she had resigned without explanation. Maria's absence left me even more alone and vulnerable. The inexplicable events intensified. I started hearing footsteps following me, though no one was ever there when I turned around. The lights flickered for no apparent reason, sometimes leaving me in total darkness for long, terrifying minutes. One night, while making my rounds on the third floor, I heard a high-pitched scream coming from one of the old cells. I ran to investigate, my heart pounding. The cell door was locked, but I could see movement through the small grated window. Using my keyring, I unlocked the door with trembling hands. What I saw inside froze my blood. The walls seemed alive. They pulsed and writhed as if made of flesh. And embedded in them, half sunken into the moving plaster, were faces, dozens of them. Eyes wide with terror, mouths open in silent screams. I stumbled back in horror, crashing into the corridor. That was when I noticed. All the corridors now seemed alive, the walls moving like waves in slow motion. The whisper that had haunted me for weeks was now a deafening chorus of tormented voices. I ran in panic, trying to find the exit, but the building seemed to have come alive, changing its layout to confuse me. Corridors ended in dead ends, stairs led to impossible places. And everywhere, those tortured faces watched me, pleading for help. I don't know how long I wandered the labyrinthine halls of the asylum. hours, days maybe. My mind oscillated between panic and a strange acceptance. At some point, I stumbled over something on the floor, the old diary I had found before. I frantically flipped through the pages, searching for some clue, some explanation. That was when I saw, hidden among the incoherent scribbles, a series of strange symbols. It looked like some kind of ritual, a way to calm the spirits trapped in the asylum. With trembling hands, I began to trace the symbols on the pulsating walls. As I drew, I felt the atmosphere around me change. The chorus of voices diminished. The walls stopped moving. When I finished the last symbol, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then a deafening roar shook the building. The walls began to crumble, releasing a wave of ghostly energy. I closed my eyes, certain I would die there. When I opened them again, I was lying on the floor of the asylum's entrance. The rising sun cast its first rays through the broken windows. The building was silent and still, as if nothing had happened. I staggered outside, breathing in the fresh morning air. But as I walked away, I looked back one last time. For an instant, I had the impression of seeing hundreds of pale figures in the windows, waving in gratitude before disappearing in the daylight. I resigned that same day. I tried to move on, convince myself it had all been a hallucination caused by stress and isolation. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear that familiar whisper. And in the walls of my room, for a brief moment, I see faces forming in the plaster. The Hospicio de Pedro II was demolished a few months later. They say it was for safety reasons, that the building was about to collapse. But I know the truth. Those walls held too many secrets, too many horrors. Some things need to stay buried. Now, years later, I still wonder about what really happened on those nights in the asylum. Did I free those tortured souls? Or did I just transfer them to a new home inside me? Sometimes, when I pass by old buildings, I feel a familiar chill. And for a moment, I can almost hear that distant whisper, "The walls are hungry.